The 1903 Russian auxiliary warship Kamchatka is one of, if not the most ludicrous legends within the naval history community. I highly recommend Drakenifil's video on the subject, but in short, the Kamchatka was a civilian collier turned armed merchant ship in the early 1900s for service with the Russian Baltic Fleet. Collier, by the way, is a coal ship, basically. There's barely any concrete evidence or information on her, so take the following specifications with a grain of salt. She weighed approximately 7,200 tons, was 76.25 meters long, and 15.25 meters wide, with a top speed of just around 12 knots. She carried 47mm cannons as her primary and only form of weaponry. Her large hulls and strong cranes led to a high carrying capacity, up to half her own weight in tonnage, making her optimal for her assigned role as a repair ship. When the fleet was ordered to sail to the Pacific after the Japanese raid on Port Arthur and the beginning of the Russo-Japanese War in 1904, it was elected that the relatively new repair ship shall sail with them. Little did they know this would be an absolutely horrendous decision, as she would cause the already daunting trip to be insurmountably worse. As the legend goes, she reported sightings of Japanese torpedo boats well away from anywhere near where Japan may have even glanced at when assigning such vessels, such as well within the deep North Atlantic. This caused increased suspicion from other European powers of the Russian Baltic Fleet, now called the Second Pacific Squadron. In no particular order, her shenanigans would include her participation in the Dogger Bank incident, which saw a group of fishing boats identified as Japanese torpedo boats, resulting in one trawler sunk and 3 civilians killed from the British, as well as several Russian warships damaged by friendly fire incidents. This nearly ended in war with the British, who deployed anywhere between one cruiser to a whole-ass fleet of battleships to keep an eye on the Russian flotilla. This also led to the Russians' decision to sail around Africa and the Cape of Good Hope, rather than the likely restricted Suez Canal, which would have had their sailing time but was unfortunately held by the British. A choose-your-own adventure of sorts taken by the ship, who quietly slipped away from the fleet, which I'd imagine was a bit of a relief to her comrades. However, she unfortunately returned to the fleet with 300 shots missing, and with a report detailing her firing on supposed torpedo boats. However, these would turn out to be French, German, and Swedish vessels this time, though no civilian vessels were damaged, nor were they even aware they were under fire for the most part due to poor gunnery on the Kamchatka's part. During a funeral salute for one of the fleet's officers, the Kamchatka reportedly fired a live shell into the cruiser Aurora. After several mundane days of very little going on, the Kamchatka supposedly believed it was too quiet and signaled the message, "Do you see torpedo boats?" to other members of the fleet, causing at least a little bit of unrest, but at that point, the fleet was probably used to this. At one point, the ship elected that it was apparently sinking. Unfortunately, to the disappointment of basically everybody involved, it was only some broken pipes. She was fine. And probably the least ridiculous event, where she behaved more like a spoiled child rather than a warship, slowing down due to reportedly bad coal that needed to be thrown overboard. This resulted in a response to throw whoever was responsible for the ship slowing overboard instead. She promptly returned to standard speed without further incident or complaint. It is said that Admiral, this guy whose name I probably can't pronounce, had the ship positioned near his flagship as a sort of stress relief, throwing binoculars and insults at the ship whenever things went wrong, which was, for the Second Pacific Squadron, quite often. This is admittedly valid, seeing that she is often the cause of such troubles. The legend would end, of course, with the rest of the Second Pacific Squadron obliterated by the Japanese fleet at Tsushima, with Kamchatka sinking by the stern and a wall of steam, with about 50 survivors being left in the water. Talk about being committed to the bit, huh?